I'm tired from work, stop nagging me. Besides, you've been neglecting your appearance lately. If you're going to complain, at least try to increase your charm as a woman. My husband mocked me with a disgruntled expression. I was shocked by my husband's words, knowing he was aware of my feelings. Angry at him, I made a phone call on the day of our wedding. It's our wedding day today. Hurry up. Thus, my husband ended up losing everything. My name is Valerie Reynolds, 28 years old. I have been married to Greg for 2 years. After losing my parents in an accident as a child, and with no relatives, I grew up in an institution. I went to college, financing it through part-time work and scholarships, leading a busy life. However, I didn't want to end my college years with just work and study. So I also participated in club activities, enjoying fulfilling days. My husband, Greg, attended the same university. But we had no interaction as we were in different departments and clubs. We started dating in our 3rd year of college after being introduced by a mutual friend. After graduation, we continued dating, and he proposed 2 years into our jobs, beginning our wedding preparations. Initially, I was hesitant about the need for a wedding. Having lost my parents early, I had become quite pragmatic, thinking weddings were a waste of money and time. However, as I began to visit venues and choose dresses, I started looking forward to the wedding. Hearing about the wedding plans from the planner, I grew excited. My in-laws were also looking forward to the wedding, and I began to feel more enthusiastic as I heard their wedding stories. Even at work, I would daydream about the wedding, eagerly anticipating it. Then, suddenly, my in-laws were in a severe accident and became unconscious. The news, reminding me of my parents' accident, left me feeling faint. They had always been kind and considerate towards me, and were delighted about the wedding. To me, who had lost her parents early, they felt like my real parents. This news was a huge shock, almost making me pass out. Fortunately, they received prompt treatment, and their lives were no longer in danger, which was a huge relief. Until I heard this news, I was extremely anxious. Seeing them regain consciousness, I collapsed from relief. Regarding the hospitalization, my husband, who was pale with worry, and I had to bear some of the costs, even though insurance covered most of it. As my in-laws were not fully conscious, we couldn't use their accounts. Therefore, since my in-laws couldn't attend the wedding due to their injuries, we decided to cancel it. I didn't want to have the wedding while they were still injured. We chose to use the wedding funds for their hospital expenses instead. Additionally, as my husband didn't have much savings, I contributed from my savings. I didn't regret it, as I wished for their long life. In fact, I was willing to spend any amount if it meant their recovery. My husband and I decided to just register our marriage for now, and save up for a wedding when his parents recovered. I worked hard every day, looking forward to the wedding and saving money. We lived frugally, being very mindful of our finances. When my in-laws learned that we had canceled the wedding and paid their hospital bills because of them, they felt guilty. However, when we told them we intended to have the wedding once they recovered, they looked forward to it and seemed motivated to get better. We didn't ask for repayment, just wishing for their quick recovery. To save for the wedding, we lived frugally and helped each other with household chores. About 6 months after our registration, my husband started working late regularly. We used to have dinner together, but he began coming home exhausted, just before midnight. As a result, he said he didn't need meals and started going straight to bed as soon as he got home. Due to my husband's continuous late return from work, looking utterly exhausted, I started to worry about his health. It was unusual for him to do overtime so frequently, but initially, I thought it might just be a temporary situation. However, a month passed, and nothing changed. My husband was either late due to overtime or out for work even on weekends. Consequently, I ended up doing all the household chores we used to share. Exhausted from both work and household duties. I was concerned about the sustainability of this lifestyle. Hey, you never used to do overtime before. What happened? Initially, I didn't want to disturb my tired husband, but his unusual behavior prompted me to ask. I started to distrust his company, thinking it had turned into a sort of evil company. The lack of rest worried me about his health. Although I asked him gently, my husband replied irritably, taking his frustration out on me. Stop bothering me. I'm tired, don't talk to me. He was unwilling to engage in conversation. While I understood that tiredness could affect his mood, his complete refusal to communicate was problematic. Whenever I insisted on talking, he would snap at me. Our conversations dwindled, and our relationship grew cold. Despite my efforts to discuss things, my husband wouldn't engage seriously. So I found myself hoping that his overtime would end soon. I thought that if his overtime ended and we returned to our previous lifestyle, our relationship would improve. However, my husband's return continued to be late as usual. When we had been registered for a year and my in-laws' health improved, and our savings began to grow, I thought it was time to consider our wedding. I was excited about the wedding, and so were my in-laws, so I suggested we start preparing. It's been nearly 2 years since we registered. And your parents are getting better, right? Shouldn't we start preparing for the wedding? I had been patient until then, but now I felt it was the right time to bring it up cheerfully. However, my husband was not enthusiastic and evasive. A wedding, huh? Isn't it fine if we don't have one? Despite knowing how much I was looking forward to the wedding, my husband seemed uninterested and tired. Your parents are also looking forward to it. Let's start preparing. Even when I persisted, my husband began to treat me dismissively. Stop nagging me when I'm tired. Weddings are a waste of money. We don't need to have one. He opposed the idea, begrudging the expense. This was unlike the man who had promised to have a wedding before our registration. Our discussions often turned into arguments filled with anger and sadness. Moreover, my husband started complaining about my appearance. You used to look prettier before we got married. It would be embarrassing to attend a wedding looking like that. I had minimized my beauty expenses to save for the wedding and the treatment of my in-laws. So it was obvious. I had even reduced my visits to the beauty salon. Yet, my husband complained further, saying I had become nagging and less feminine. You've lost your femininity. He said it as if spitting out the words. It seemed he didn't find it amusing that I had increasingly been speaking my mind to my husband. As a married couple, our interactions were naturally different than when we were dating. I was taking responsibility as a wife, but to be criticized for it was unfair. Feeling aggrieved by his remarks about not being feminine and his lack of concern, I struggled to hold back tears. Our conversations often led to arguments, resulting in a strained and unhappy marriage. One day, my college friend, Kathy Morris, invited me for a change of scenery to a high-end restaurant in a hotel. Kathy knew about my troubles with my husband and had been encouraging me for over a year and a half. As our relationship continued to deteriorate, concerned about my growing depression, she had suggested this outing. Let's change the mood here. Valerie, you have been enduring a lot since your registration, and you deserve a treat for yourself. Since my registration, I had been visiting my in-laws while saving money for the wedding by cutting down on expenses. I used to be particular about beauty and fashion, but I had minimized it, resisting the temptation to buy desired cosmetics and clothes. I managed to make do with what I already had, gradually losing the joy of shopping. Kathy's words made me realize that I had indeed been enduring a lot. Thinking that a nice meal might be a good way to recharge, I decided to join her for lunch. It felt good to have something enjoyable planned after a long time. That day, even my usually grumpy husband seemed in a good mood, humming and looking excited. "You seem happy. Is something going on?" When I asked out of curiosity, he cheerfully mentioned he was going on a week-long business trip. "I've been stuck going to the office all this time. So even though it's for work, it feels like a trip. I'm looking forward to it." He was scheduled to leave on the same day I was going to lunch, planning to catch the train. "I'll be leaving early for the first train." On the day, Greg left the house smiling around 5 a.m. As for me, I decided to wear a formal dress I had from my university days to the upscale restaurant, putting extra effort into dressing up for the first time in a while. I was relieved the dress still fit, as it was the only outfit I had that seemed suitable for a high-end restaurant at the hotel. The hotel, where weddings are also held, had a wedding scheduled that afternoon, as indicated by the sign at the entrance. It seemed the wedding ceremony would take place in the adjacent church, followed by a reception in the hotel's grand hall. I looked at the sign with envy and entered the restaurant. It was a popular place despite being expensive, so I had reserved a table for 11 a.m. And we were promptly seated upon arrival. Kathy and I enjoyed a delicious meal, and while having coffee afterward, it seemed the wedding was about to start. Kathy noticed first and directed my gaze toward the window overlooking the outside, where the bride was walking, seemingly about to enter the ceremony venue with a man who appeared to be her father. The bride, in a pure white dress, looked blissful. The dress was beautiful, and so was she, making me look forward to my own wedding someday. The ceremony was happening behind where I was seated. After watching the bride enter, I turned back to my table. After talking with Kathy for a while, she suddenly choked on her coffee. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Concerned, I saw Kathy staring in disbelief behind me. With a trembling voice, she said, "Hey, isn't that guy?" Prompted by her reaction, I looked back and saw, to my shock, the man walking beside the bride in a tuxedo was unmistakably my husband. "What? Huh? Why?" Shaken, I blurted out, and Kathy, realizing she wasn't mistaken, started to get angry. "What is he doing, leaving Valerie behind like this?" Kathy, knowing my husband from before and having heard about our issues, was furious to see him with another woman. As I started to get overwhelmed, Kathy's anger helped me regain my composure. I stopped her from confronting my husband and made an urgent call. "Hello, Mother?" I called my in-laws, asking them to come quickly with a sense of urgency. "There's a wedding today. Hurry." I was so shaken by the sight of my husband that I inadvertently dropped formalities. Hearing wedding, my mother-in-law happily mentioned she was with relatives and would come right away before hanging up. "A wedding today. Congratulations. Wow, how wonderful. Congratulations." It seemed that my in-laws and their relatives were nearby, as they arrived at the hotel within 5 minutes. Everyone wore happy smiles, especially my in-laws, who seemed overjoyed. "Oh, it's been a while. Kathy, you're here too." Kathy and my husband have been childhood friends, so she was familiar with my in-laws. My mother-in-law greeted her warmly. However, they quickly noticed my husband's absence and began to look puzzled. Kathy's expression, too, was far from the joyous mood of a wedding, it was tense. I hadn't explained the situation clearly over the phone, so I felt sorry for getting their hopes up. But I proceeded to tell them the truth. "Actually, Greg got married to another woman today." "What?" Normally, someone already registered wouldn't have a wedding with another person. At first, they were frozen, not understanding my words. But as they grasped the situation, anger towards my husband began to surface. "What? What is Greg doing leaving Valerie behind?" Before my in-laws arrived, I had informed the hotel that my husband's parents and relatives would be coming. So we were led into the reception hall. The staff at the venue were surprised by our sudden entrance. Judging by the faces and the number of people, this wedding seemed to be a small affair. It looked like the bride's relatives and friends, with none of my husband's acquaintances present. What is this all about? The bride seemed angry at our interruption, but my husband, noticing us, froze. Taking a deep breath, I raised my voice and confronted my husband. You said you were going on a business trip. What are you doing here? You're already married to me. Why are you having a wedding with someone else? As I spoke, anger surged within me at the thought of my husband neglecting our wedding plans to cheat. My words caused confusion among the guests, who looked at us incredulously. My husband, not expecting me to be there, remained flustered. I've been talking about having a wedding, and you ignored it. What is this all about? So, when I raised my voice to explain the situation in more detail, the bride responded before my husband could. Maybe it's because you're not attractive. Unrelated people should leave. Don't disturb the wedding. That man over there is my husband, so I am involved. The bride was assertive, but I stood my ground, raising my voice. It seemed she knew about the affair and still went ahead with the wedding, which made me more determined not to let her win. The argument revealed that the bride knowingly married a married man, and everyone at the venue turned their condemning eyes towards my husband and the bride. We approached the two as they stood there. My husband, still trying to make excuses, was cut off by my firm statement. Look, this is a misunderstanding. It's not what it looks like. You've been cheating for over a year. Did you think I didn't know? My husband was shocked and froze. I had been aware of his infidelity and had even hired a private investigator to confirm my suspicions. It was obvious something was off with his constant late nights and weekend absences. Underestimating me was his mistake. I knew that the other woman worked at the same company as him. So much for your business trip on the train. It's quite close, isn't it? I had suspected that his business trips were to meet his mistress, but I never imagined it would be for a wedding so close by. My husband paled and shrank under my accusation. Turning away from my husband, I addressed his mistress directly. You're Aaron from his workplace, right? You knew he was married and still pursued him. You do know that's wrong, right? It seemed that my husband, flattered by the attention of a younger woman who made no secret of her feelings for him, had willingly entered the affair. I didn't intend to forgive my husband for not refusing, but I also thought it was problematic for someone to pursue a married man knowingly. I addressed Aaron, who seemed to lack common sense, in a tone like speaking to a misbehaving child. However, Aaron seemed annoyed for a moment by my tone, then quickly adopted a smug expression, mocking me. Acting all high and mighty. Greg got tired of you, didn't he? I heard that you were done as a woman after you got married. She laughed at me, believing she was more attractive as a woman. Even in this situation, she seemed to think she was in the right, remaining defiant despite the affair being exposed. Glancing at my husband, he was surrounded by my in-laws and Kathy, seemingly being lectured but still making excuses. Seeing that Aaron wouldn't admit her wrongdoing, I decided to show the evidence. You're unashamed. Fine, I have my own plans. I approached the hotel staff and arranged to use a projector, which seemed to be set up for entertainment. Once everything was ready, the staff dimmed the lights at my request. Look at this. This is the evidence of their affair. I connected my smartphone and announced, displaying photos of my husband and Aaron's affair on the screen. I had received the proof in digital format and had it ready on my phone. The guests at the venue reacted with shock and disbelief, murmuring in outrage at the bride. Seeing the evidence, my husband and Aaron frowned, realizing they were in a bad position. After presenting all the evidence, I turned to them and demanded compensation. Then, the two whispered to each other and approached me with forced smiles. "Please, this is a misunderstanding. This isn't really a wedding." "Exactly. This is just a bridal show for work." They blatantly lied to avoid paying compensation. The hotel staff and everyone present looked on with disdain, with a staff member murmuring that they hadn't arranged for such a show. And this was indeed a real wedding. Aaron had been mocking me for being neglected by my husband. No one believed their denial of the affair. The venue fell silent for a moment, but after the staff's comment, the guests began to react. They expressed their anger, with some friends deciding to cut ties and start leaving. "Wait, no. Please." Aaron seemed confused, perhaps expecting her acquaintances to support her, but they gradually left. I then turned to my husband and delivered the final blow. "I'll be taking that compensation. And Greg, don't expect to work as usual, I've already informed your company about this." I had inquired with my husband's company about his supposed business trips, realizing he was using work as an excuse for his affair. I had called his office to inquire about his work attendance. "What do you mean?" My husband was flustered, not expecting me to go this far. It turned out he had been leaving work on time without any overtime. When I mentioned his continuous late nights, the company was quite surprised. Moreover, it turned out my husband had been pretending to be a devoted husband at work. When I called, they immediately expressed concern for me. The reason for their concern was that my husband had lied about needing time off for this business trip, claiming that I was ill and required care. He had even been acting as if he was struggling due to my illness for a while. Once I explained the situation, it seemed the news reached his boss, who could be heard expressing anger over the phone. Of course, I also mentioned his affair. My husband hadn't shown any inappropriate behavior with Aaron at work. So this news was also met with surprise. "What have you done? That's terrible. Harassing me just because he didn't pay attention to you." When I mentioned informing the company, they angrily blamed me. But my in-laws and Kathy were there, defending me and retorting back. After making my point clear, I left the hotel along with the departing guests. Later, I filed for compensation and requested a divorce. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Please forgive me. After having a wedding with your mistress, how dare you?" My husband cried and begged, but I was disgusted by him. My call to his company had already led to his isolation at work. Furthermore, despite demanding compensation from Aaron, there was no response. So I contacted her parents, and they apparently scolded her. Because of that woman telling my parents about the affair, I've been disowned. They said I have to pay the compensation myself. What am I supposed to do now? Her complaints to my husband at the office led to an argument, and the details previously known only to a few spread throughout the company. Consequently, both were judged as having character flaws and received demotion orders to remote locations, resulting in decreased salaries. My husband, who hadn't been as diligent in saving as I had, pleaded that he couldn't pay such a large sum. "I can't pay this much." I had already moved, so my husband couldn't come directly, but he persistently contacted me. Eventually, my in-laws intervened, and I received the compensation, finalizing the divorce. Aaron also paid her dues, successfully concluding the affair-related proceedings. It took much longer than expected, but I finally felt relieved when the compensation was settled, and my husband's persistent contacts ceased. Regarding the cost of the wedding my husband had with Aaron, it was revealed that he had asked my in-laws for a refund of the medical expenses we had covered, thus having access to a substantial amount of money. Astonishingly, upon my husband's request, My in-laws had given him a large sum of $20,000. We thought it was for a nice wedding to surprise you, Valerie, as Greg said he wanted to make you happy. We gave it to him thinking of all the help you've given us. Of course, I was unaware that my husband had said such things. My in-laws kept it a secret because my husband wanted to surprise me with a lavish wedding. Since I had contributed more to the medical expenses, it should have been a matter to discuss with me. Hearing this, I felt more exhausted than angry at my husband's selfishness, using money for an affair under pretense. Shame on him. We gave that money thinking it was for Valerie. Upon learning of my husband's misuse of money, my in-laws became furious and disowned him. Later, I heard my husband and Erin did get married, but they didn't seem happy. Both incurred debts to pay the compensation and were now working tirelessly to repay, living in a cheap, run-down apartment. Furthermore, Erin, being quite assertive, often scolded my husband, and he had no freedom in spending money. My husband, easily swayed by her, seemed destined to be led by her. Though I was shocked when I first discovered my husband's affair, I now feel relieved to be rid of such an unreliable husband. Since then, my in-laws and Kathy, who introduced me to my husband, have apologized, but I told them not to worry as it was my husband's fault. Although divorced from my husband, I maintain a good relationship with my in-laws. They are like real parents to me, sensible and understanding. Which makes me wonder why my husband turned out the way he did. While I still long for a wedding, this experience has tired me. So I've decided to enjoy my single life for a while.